The morning sun poured through the massive airport windows as passengers hurried toward their gates, coffee in one hand, boarding passes in the other. Among them was Karen, a woman with a sharp tongue and an even sharper sense of entitlement. Her designer sunglasses sat high on her nose as if shielding her from the incompetence of the world around her. Today, she wasn't just taking a flight, she was about to make a scene that the entire crew would never forget. It started small. A polite flight attendant named Mia simply asked Karen to place her oversized handbag in the overhead bin. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Do you know who I am?" she hissed loud enough for others to hear. The cabin went silent. Passengers exchanged nervous glances, while Mia remained calm, her voice steady and professional. But Karen wasn't done. She wanted an audience when the plane doors closed and the engines hummed. Karen pressed the call button again and again, demanding attention. "This service is unacceptable. I'll have you fired before this plane lands," she barked. Mia apologized gently, offering water and reassurance, but Karen's rage only grew. She accused Mia of disrespect and attitude, insisting that the captain be informed immediately. Moments later, the captain himself appeared, a tall man with calm eyes and quiet authority. Karen's smirk returned, certain she had one. But what happened next silenced the entire cabin. The captain didn't side with her. Instead, he made a decision that no one, especially Karen, saw coming. That flight, meant to be just another morning journey, turned into a lesson in humility that left every passenger clapping. Because sometimes karma doesn't wait until landing, it boards the flight with you. The soft morning light spilled through the wide glass panels of Los Angeles International Airport, washing everything in shades of gold and white. The intercom buzzed with constant flight announcements. The rhythmic hum of rolling suitcases echoed down the long terminal, and the smell of coffee and jet fuel hung thick in the air. It was just another busy day at LAX, crowded, noisy, and alive with impatient travelers trying to get somewhere else. In the middle of it all, Karen walked like she owned the place. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile floor, cutting through the morning chatter. She was tall, confident, and perfectly dressed in a cream blazer and oversized sunglasses that hid most of her face. Every step she took seemed to say, "I am not like the rest of you." Her phone was pressed to her ear as she complained to someone, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "No, I told them already. It's ridiculous. They upgraded me last time because of that mistake, so they should do it again," she said, glancing at the airline counter with thinly veiled disgust. "Honestly, I don't understand how people can work here and not know basic customer service." The young man at the gate counter tried to maintain a polite smile as she approached. "Good morning, ma'am. May I see your boarding pass, please?" Karen handed it over dramatically, sighing as if she were being asked for something unreasonable. "You know," she began, "I fly with your airline all the time. I don't understand why I'm still sitting in economy. I should be upgraded. Look at my points." She shoved her phone screen forward, showing a rewards account. The gate agent, clearly used to this kind of customer, nodded patiently. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but all upgrades have been filled for this flight." Karen's lips twisted, then bumped someone. "I've had a long week, and I deserve a little comfort." "Unfortunately, that's not possible," he said, his voice firm yet respectful. "But I'll make sure you're comfortable once on board." She gave a short laugh that carried a tone of disbelief. "Comfortable and coach? Do you know who I am?" A few passengers in line turned their heads, pretending not to stare. The gate agent just smiled politely and handed back her ticket. "Boarding will begin in a few minutes, ma'am." "Thank you for your patience." Karen scoffed but walked toward the seating area, muttering something under her breath about incompetence. She sat down near the window, crossed her legs, and took off her sunglasses, revealing sharp eyes lined perfectly with makeup. She checked her reflection in her phone's camera, adjusted a strand of blonde hair, and looked around. The crowd annoyed her, families with noisy kids, couples with backpacks, and older people clutching neck pillows. She leaned back, sipping her iced latte, and sighed again. "Dichotomy," she whispered, like it was a curse word, as boarding was announced. Karen stood immediately, brushing imaginary dust off her blazer. She cut to the front of the line before her group was called, ignoring the groans from those behind her. When the flight attendant at the door smiled and said, "Good morning, welcome aboard," Karen barely nodded. Stepping into the cabin, she frowned. "This plane looks small," she muttered to herself. The air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, and the sunlight streamed in from the windows, brightening every corner of the cabin. Mia, a young flight attendant with kind eyes and a warm smile, greeted her. "Good morning, ma'am. Can I help you find your seat?" Karen held up her ticket. "Yes, you can help me by moving me to first class." Mia blinked, unsure if she was joking. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the seating arrangements are finalized. I can help you store your bag if you'd like." Karen's jaw tightened. "This bag doesn't go up there. It's a limited edition handbag, and I'm not shoving it in an overhead bin like a duffel." Mia kept her tone calm and professional. "I understand, but for takeoff, all large items must be stored. You can keep smaller personal belongings with you." Karen crossed her arms, glaring. "Do you really think this is large? You need to learn the difference between luggage and luxury." Passengers behind her began to grow impatient as the boarding line stalled. Mia offered a gentle smile. I'll be happy to assist you in placing it carefully so it stays safe. We just need to make sure everyone can be seated so we can depart on time. Karen sighed dramatically, rolling her eyes as if she were the victim of great injustice. Fine, but if anything happens to it, you'll regret it. She shoved the bag toward the bin, barely helping as Mia carefully placed it inside. Thank you, ma'am, Mia said softly. Karen didn't reply. She marched down the aisle to her seat, glaring at anyone who dared make eye contact. She finally sat down near the window, arms crossed, lips tight. She hated everything about her situation: the narrow seat, the chatter around her, the toddler kicking the back of her chair. The plane filled quickly. A man sat beside her, giving her a polite nod. Good morning, he said. Karen didn't look at him. Let's just not talk, she said flatly, putting her earbuds in. The man blinked, surprised, then turned away. As the flight attendants performed the safety demonstration, Karen tapped her phone impatiently, scrolling through social media. When Mia walked by to check seatbelts, Karen muttered, "You people really enjoy telling grown adults what to do, huh?" Mia smiled kindly. "It's just for safety, ma'am." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Whatever, just don't forget this drink better be cold when you serve it." The engines roared softly as the plane began to taxi. The morning light shimmered on the runway, and passengers settled in. But Karen wasn't settling into anything. She shifted in her seat, frowned at her armrest, then pressed the call button. Mia appeared instantly. "Yes, ma'am. This seat is too tight. It's ridiculous. I can't even stretch my legs." "I'm sorry about that, ma'am. We're fully booked today, but I'll do what I can to make you comfortable." Karen sighed heavily, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Comfortable in this? You people really have no idea how to treat frequent flyers." Mia nodded gently. "I'll bring you some water once we're in the air." Karen rolled her eyes again. "Make it sparkling and cold. I don't drink warm water." As the plane lifted into the sky, Los Angeles grew smaller beneath the clouds. The morning sun shone bright through the window, lighting up Karen's face as she stared outside, muttering about how some people shouldn't be allowed to work in customer service. To everyone else, it was just another short flight. But to Mia, the calm, polite attendant, and to Karen, the woman who believed the world revolved around her, was only the beginning of something far bigger. Neither of them knew that before this flight landed, the balance of power in that cabin would shift in the most unexpected way imaginable. And as the plane climbed higher into the perfect blue morning sky, the first crack in Karen's sense of control had already begun to form. The airplane had leveled off into smooth air, the bright morning light streaming through the small oval windows. Clouds drifted below like soft white waves, and most passengers had begun to relax into the rhythm of flight. Some pulled out their laptops, others leaned back with their headphones, and the quiet hum of the engines filled the cabin with a steady calm. Everyone seemed at peace, everyone except Karen. She sat stiffly in her seat, arms crossed, lips pursed, looking as if she were enduring a great personal tragedy. The man next to her had already given up trying to make conversation. He had put on noise-canceling headphones and leaned toward the aisle, giving Karen as much space as possible. A soft chime rang as the seatbelt sign turned off. The flight attendants began moving gracefully down the aisle with calm smiles, checking passengers and preparing for drink service. Mia, the same attendant Karen had scolded earlier, worked quietly and politely. Her brown hair was tied neatly in a bun, and her calm demeanor seemed unshakable. As Mia approached Karen's row, she gave her usual kind smile. "Good morning again, ma'am. Would you like something to drink?" Karen looked up slowly, her eyes narrowing. "You took your time." "I'm sorry for the wait," Mia said gently. "We had to make sure everyone was safely seated before we began." Karen sighed loudly. "I specifically said I wanted sparkling water, cold, and not the cheap kind. Do you even have Perrier or San Pellegrino on this flight?" Mia kept her voice even. "I'm afraid we only have the brand provided by the airline, ma'am, but I can assure you it's cold." Karen gave a small, mocking laugh. "Assure me? Oh, that's adorable. Fine, bring whatever you have, but if it tastes flat, I'll be reporting it." Mia nodded, still polite. "Of course, ma'am." She turned to go, but Karen wasn't done. "Wait," she snapped. "Make sure there's ice in it, but not too much. I don't want watered-down bubbles." "Yes, ma'am," Mia said softly, then walked to the galley. The man sitting next to Karen finally spoke, his voice low. "You know, she's just doing her job." Karen shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "Excuse me, I'm just saying she's being polite. No reason to be so hard on her." Karen scoffed. "I pay for service and I expect it done right. If you're fine with mediocrity, that's your problem." The man shook his head and turned back toward the aisle, choosing silence. Karen, satisfied that she'd won that small exchange, crossed her arms again. When Mia returned a few minutes later with the drink, she placed it carefully on the tray. "Here you are, ma'am. Sparkling water with ice, not too much." Karen picked it up, took one sip and frowned. "Too much ice. I'm sorry, ma'am. Would you like me to take it back?" "No," Karen said, her voice rising just a little. "I want you to learn to listen better. That's the problem with people these days. You don't pay attention. You just nod and smile." Mia nodded once more, her composure unwavering. "I apologize for the inconvenience." Karen rolled her eyes. Apologizing doesn't fix incompetence. Mia gave a small polite smile and turned to serve the next row. The passengers sitting nearby exchanged uncomfortable looks, some whispering softly. It was clear Karen was the only one enjoying herself. Her irritation seemed to fuel her sense of control, but the peace didn't last long. About 15 minutes later, when Mia was collecting trash, Karen pressed the call button again. The soft ding echoed down the cabin. Mia, balancing an armful of cups and napkins, approached politely. "Yes, ma'am." Karen was holding a coffee cup. "This is lukewarm," she complained. "Do you people not know how to make hot coffee? It's supposed to be hot, not barely warm." "I can get you a fresh one, ma'am," Mia replied. "Would you like me to brew a new pot?" Karen leaned back, shaking her head with an exaggerated sigh. "Of course you'd offer that now. Forget it. If this is the best you can do, I pity whoever trained you." Mia's polite smile faltered for just a second. She took a quiet breath and said softly, "I'll still make you a new one, ma'am. I want to make sure you're satisfied." Karen raised her voice slightly. "Satisfied? Oh, trust me, that ship has sailed." People turned their heads. The cabin was no longer quiet. A few rows ahead, a mother covered her child's ears. A man whispered to his wife, "Is she serious?" Mia walked calmly back to the galley, ignoring the murmurs. Her hands trembled just a little as she poured a new cup. She had dealt with difficult passengers before, but Karen was different, cold, cutting and cruel without reason. Mia had been trained to stay calm, but even she could feel her patience wearing thin. When she returned, she gently set the fresh coffee down. "Here you go, ma'am. It's freshly brewed." Karen sniffed it like a wine critic, then took a sip. "It's better," she admitted reluctantly. "At least someone on this plane is learning." Mia smiled faintly and stepped away before any further comments could sting. For the next half hour, Karen seemed unusually quiet. She scrolled through her phone, tapped her nails against the tray table, and occasionally adjusted her seatbelt. Mia hoped that maybe the worst was over. But that hope didn't last long. As lunch service began, Mia rolled the cart down the aisle again. She offered passengers their meal options with the same practiced smile. "Chicken pasta or vegetarian wrap today, ma'am." When she reached Karen, she repeated the line. Karen looked horrified. "That's it. No special options. No gluten-free or organic choices." "I'm afraid those are the two options for this flight, ma'am," Mia said politely. Karen leaned back with a snort. "Of course, mediocrity on a tray." She crossed her arms again. "Fine, I'll take the chicken, but if it's dry, you'll hear about it." Mia served her quietly and continued down the aisle. Karen took one bite, grimaced, and pressed the call button again. "Yes, ma'am," Mia said, her tone still even. "This chicken is rubbery. Do you even taste the food you serve?" "I'm sorry you don't enjoy it," Mia said softly. "Unfortunately, that's the only option available." Karen leaned forward. "Then bring me the captain. I want to file a complaint now." Mia blinked, taken aback. "The captain, ma'am?" "Yes, the captain. If management won't handle this properly, maybe he will. I'll have you written up for unprofessional behavior." Several passengers turned, clearly irritated now. A woman across the aisle said under her breath, "Unbelievable." A man behind Karen muttered, "She's out of control." Mia took another deep breath. "Ma'am, I'll notify the purser about your concern." "No," Karen snapped. "I want the captain, and I won't stop until he comes out here." Mia nodded quietly and walked to the intercom, her heart pounding. She didn't want to involve the captain, but the situation had gone too far. Karen had turned a routine flight into a public spectacle and the entire cabin was watching. A few minutes later, the door to the cockpit opened. The tour captain stepped out, his face calm, eyes steady. He walked toward Karen's seat, every passenger following him with silent anticipation. Karen straightened her blazer, smirking slightly. "Finally," she said, "someone who might actually listen." The captain stopped beside her row, his tone respectful but firm. "Good morning, ma'am. I understand there's been a problem." Karen crossed her legs and lifted her chin. "Yes, this flight attendant has been nothing but rude and unprofessional. I demand she be disciplined immediately." The captain nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I see. Thank you for bringing this to my attention." He looked briefly at Mia, who stood quietly nearby. Then back to Karen. "Let's talk about this properly." And with that calm, steady tone, the balance in the cabin began to shift because the captain's idea of properly was not what Karen expected at all. The cabin was so quiet you could almost hear the soft hum of the air circulating through the vents. Every passenger had gone still, their eyes fixed on the tall man standing in the aisle, the captain. His uniform was crisp, his shoulders straight, and his calm presence seemed to command instant respect. Even Karen, who had been loud and confident moments earlier, hesitated for a second, but only a second. She quickly crossed her legs, lifted her chin, and put on a smug smile. "Finally," she said, her voice dripping with false relief. "It's about time someone in charge came to deal with this." The captain nodded once, his expression neutral. "Good morning, ma'am. I understand there's been a concern with our service today." "Yes," Karen said firmly. "This flight attendant," she gestured sharply toward Mia, "has been completely disrespectful. She talks down to me, ignores my requests, and serves me food that's unfit for paying customers. I've flown with this airline for years, and I expect better. I want her reported immediately." Mia stood a few steps behind, hands clasped in front of her, doing her best to keep her composure. Her heart was beating fast, but she stayed quiet. She had been trained to never argue with passengers, no matter how unfair the accusation. The captain looked at Mia for a moment, then back to Karen. "I see," he said calmly. "Thank you for letting me know. I'd like to understand the situation fully. Would you mind telling me exactly what happened?" Karen launched into her story with dramatic flair. Her voice carried across several rows as she exaggerated every detail. "It started when she tried to force me to put my designer bag in the overhead bin. Then she served me lukewarm coffee and flat sparkling water. The food was terrible, and she refused to get me what I asked for. She's been rude from the start." The captain listened silently, nodding slowly, never interrupting. When Karen finally stopped, he waited a moment before speaking. His voice was low and even, the kind that made people lean in to hear it. "Thank you for explaining, ma'am. I appreciate you taking the time to share your experience." Karen smirked slightly, thinking she had won. "Well, I'm glad someone here still values professionalism. I trust you'll be taking this seriously." "I do take it seriously," the captain said, his tone unchanging. "That's why I need to speak honestly with you." Karen blinked. "Honestly?" "Yes, ma'am." The captain clasped his hands behind his back. "Our crew members are trained to follow strict safety and service procedures. Asking you to store your bag, for example, isn't optional. It's a federal regulation. And from what I've observed, our attendant has remained professional and polite throughout." Karen's smile faded a little. "Are you saying you don't believe me?" The captain met her gaze steadily. "I'm saying I believe in fairness. My duty is to ensure both passengers and crew are treated with respect." Karen's cheeks flushed slightly. "Well, I don't feel respected. I understand that," the captain said softly, "but respect works both ways." The words hung in the air like a quiet storm. Passengers nearby shifted in their seats. A few exchanged looks. Others hid small smiles. Karen's face hardened. "I'm the customer," she said sharply. "The customer is always right." The captain's expression didn't change. "That phrase has truth in it when the customer is reasonable," he said calmly. "But when respect turns into mistreatment, it crosses a line. I will not allow any member of my crew to be spoken to or treated disrespectfully." Karen's mouth fell slightly open. "Excuse me." The captain's tone remained even, but firm. "You've called my crew incompetent, rude, and unprofessional. You've raised your voice, disrupted other passengers, and made demands beyond what's reasonable. I've been informed by both the purser and nearby passengers that behavior cannot continue." A soft murmur rippled through the cabin. Karen's eyes darted around, realizing people were watching closely. Her confidence began to falter. "So what? You're taking her side," she snapped. "I'm not taking sides," the captain replied. "I'm enforcing respect on this aircraft. My responsibility is to every person on board, including you, but that means everyone follows the same standard." Karen's voice wavered slightly. "You can't talk to me like this. I'll file a complaint." "Of course," the captain said. "You have every right to do so. I'll even provide you the proper form when we land." The way he said it with that quiet composure made it clear he wasn't intimidated. Karen stared at him, speechless for the first time. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, judging, whispering, waiting to see what she'd do next. The captain leaned slightly closer, his voice soft but powerful. "Ma'am, I'd like to offer you a choice. You can continue your flight peacefully and treat the crew with courtesy, or we'll have to return to the gate, and you may not be permitted to continue with us today." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Karen's face turned pale. "You wouldn't dare," she said, but the words came out weaker than before. The captain straightened. "I would, because the safety and respect of my crew are non-negotiable." Silence filled the air again. The hum of the engines seemed louder now, pressing against the weight of the moment. For a few long seconds, no one moved. Then Karen's gaze fell, and her voice came out smaller than before. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll behave." The captain gave a small nod. "Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your understanding." He turned toward Mia, who was still standing quietly. "Miss, thank you for maintaining your professionalism." Mia smiled faintly, her eyes glossy with relief. "Thank you, Captain." As the captain walked back toward the cockpit, the cabin remained silent for a beat. Then, as if someone had pressed play again, whispers began to spread, soft but full of approval. The man sitting next to Karen removed his headphones and said quietly, "Guess the captain does know what he's doing." Karen didn't respond. She stared out the window, her reflection showing a mix of anger and embarrassment. Her fingers twisted the strap of her handbag as if clinging to what little pride she had left. Mia, meanwhile, returned to her duties. The relief that washed over her felt almost dizzying. She continued down the aisle, checking passengers, refilling cups, and offering soft smiles. But this time, the smiles she received back were warmer, genuine gratitude for how she had handled herself as she neared the back of the cabin. Another flight attendant whispered, "You okay?" Mia nodded. "I am now in her seat." Karen sat quietly, staring down at her untouched meal. The captain's words echoed in her mind. Respect works both ways. For the first time she felt a small, unfamiliar sting of guilt. She had spent years getting what she wanted by being loud and demanding, but today, it hadn't worked. Outside, sunlight glimmered over the ocean far below. The plane sliced through the air, steady and calm, just like the captain himself. And though no one said it aloud, every passenger knew they had just witnessed something rare, a perfect balance of authority and grace. For the rest of the flight, Karen didn't press the call button. She didn't complain. She sat silently, lost in her thoughts. And Mia, though tired, moved through the cabin with her quiet smile. Stronger now than ever before. High above the clouds, justice had been served not with anger, but with calm. And for the first time, Karen began to understand what true power really looked like. The sun climbed higher in the clear blue sky as the airplane sailed smoothly above the scattered cotton clouds. From the window seats, the world below looked distant and peaceful. Teeny towns, winding rivers, and endless stretches of green and gold. Inside the cabin, however, the atmosphere was still thick with quiet tension. Passengers whispered softly, stealing glances at Karen, who had finally stopped talking. For the first time since boarding, Karen sat completely still. Her back was straight, her hands resting on her lap, but her mind was anything but calm. The captain's words, "Respect works both ways," played in her head over and over like a broken record. She stared at her reflection in the window. The perfect hair, the flawless makeup, the expensive clothes. She looked exactly the same as she always did, but something felt different. Her confidence had cracked, and behind it was something she didn't recognize. Shame. Across the aisle, Mia was helping an elderly woman adjust her seatbelt. Her smile was warm, her movements gentle. It was as though the earlier confrontation had never happened. Watching her, Karen felt a twinge of discomfort. How could someone stay so calm, so kind, after being humiliated like that? She glanced around the cabin. Every now and then someone would meet her eyes and quickly look away. Others avoided her completely. The same passengers who had been silent witnesses to her arrogance now saw her as the villain of the flight. The realization made her chest tighten. For someone who prided herself on control and respect, the shift was unbearable. Mia rolled the beverage cart past her row. "Would you like something to drink, ma'am?" she asked politely, her tone just as kind as ever. Karen hesitated, then nodded. "Water, please." "Of course," Mia said, placing a cup on the tray. She offered her a small, genuine smile before moving to the next row. Karen picked up the cup, staring at the ice cubes bobbing gently. The word "please" had slipped out without her thinking. Maybe it was because she didn't want another scene, or maybe because deep down she knew she had been wrong. She took a small sip, the cold water calming her throat but not her conscience. Time passed slowly. The captain made an announcement over the speaker, his steady voice filling the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're cruising at 33,000 feet. Weather ahead looks clear, and we're expecting to arrive in Miami about 15 minutes early. Please sit back and enjoy the rest of your flight." A soft ripple of relief and excitement spread through the passengers. Mia continued her work, refilling cups and checking seatbelts. When she walked by Karen's row again, Karen found herself blurting something she hadn't planned. "Excuse me, Mia." Mia paused, surprised but polite. "Yes, ma'am." Karen's voice wavered slightly. Could I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course," Mia said. "Would you like to step to the back of the cabin for a bit more privacy?" Karen nodded silently. The passengers nearby pretended not to notice as she stood and followed Mia toward the galley. The faint hum of the engines filled the narrow space, mixed with the soft clink of cups and trays. Karen took a deep breath before speaking. "Listen, about earlier." She stopped, searching for words that didn't come easily. "I may have overreacted." Mia said nothing, waiting patiently. "I was frustrated," Karen continued, twisting her fingers together. "I shouldn't have spoken to you the way I did. You were just doing your job. I made it harder." Mia looked at her for a long moment. There was no smugness in her expression, no trace of anger, just quiet understanding. "Thank you, ma'am," she said softly. "That means a lot." Karen nodded, her throat tight. "I'm not used to being called out like that," she admitted, forcing a nervous laugh. "The captain, he made me feel like a child." Mia smiled gently. "He's good at reminding people what really matters up here. We're all just trying to make sure everyone gets where they're going safely and, hopefully, in a good mood." Karen lowered her eyes. "I guess I didn't help with that part." "It happens," Mia said simply. "Sometimes flying brings out the worst in people. Nerves, delays, tight seats. I've seen all kinds of emotions. The important thing is that you understand it now." Karen looked up, surprised by the kindness in her tone. "You're not angry?" Mia shook her head. "I don't hold grudges. My job is to make sure you're safe and cared for, even when things get difficult." For a moment, Karen didn't know what to say. She felt small but also strangely relieved. "You're a better person than I am," she said quietly. Mia smiled again. "I don't think it's about being better. We all have bad days. Maybe this was just yours." Karen laughed softly, an honest laugh this time, not the sharp, sarcastic one she usually used. "You're right. It definitely was." A few seconds passed before Mia gently touched her arm. "Would you like some coffee?" Fresh this time. Karen smiled faintly. I'd like that. They stood there for a few quiet minutes as the plane continued its steady glide across the sky. When Mia handed her the coffee, Karen accepted it with both hands and whispered, "Thank you." Back in her seat, Karen sipped the coffee slowly. It wasn't fancy or gourmet, but somehow it tasted better than any she'd had before. Maybe it was the warmth. Maybe it was the peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The man beside her leaned slightly toward her and said in a low voice, "That was a nice thing you did." Karen blinked, surprised. "You heard?" He chuckled softly. "Hard not to. The whole cabin's been watching this play out like a reality show. Good to see a happy ending." Karen smiled awkwardly. "Yeah, I guess I deserved that lesson." He nodded. "We all need one sometimes." As the flight went on, the atmosphere lightened. Passengers began chatting again. Children giggled, and the sound of soda cans opening replaced the earlier tension. Even Karen felt the difference. It was as if a heavy curtain had been lifted. When Mia passed by one last time before landing, Karen stopped her gently. "Mia," she said, "thank you for your patience and for not giving up on being kind, even when I didn't deserve it." Mia smiled warmly. "It's never too late to be kind, ma'am." Karen returned the smile. For the first time, it wasn't forced. It reached her eyes. "You can call me Karen," she said quietly. "All right," Mia said, still smiling. "Thank you, Karen." As the plane began its descent, the sunlight shifted, bathing the cabin in golden light. The captain's voice came over the speakers again, calm and confident. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're preparing to land in Miami. Please fasten your seatbelts and return your trays to the upright position." Karen gazed out the window, watching as the clouds drifted past. She thought about how she had started this morning angry, entitled, and ready to fight anyone who got in her way. And now, here she was, humbled and strangely at peace. Sometimes, she realized, it takes a flight through the sky to truly see yourself clearly. As the wheels touched down smoothly on the runway, a wave of quiet applause filled the cabin. It wasn't just for the perfect landing, it was for the calm, the courage, and maybe even the second chances that had taken flight that day. The plane rolled smoothly to a stop at Miami International Airport, the soft hum of the engines fading into silence. A sense of calm settled over the cabin as passengers unbuckled their seatbelts and reached for their belongings. Karen sat still for a moment, staring out the oval window, watching airport workers guide luggage carts under the blazing Florida sun. The heat shimmered off the tarmac, and for the first time in what felt like years, she felt a warmth inside her that wasn't fueled by anger but by reflection. She took a deep breath, letting the recycled air fill her lungs. Everything that had happened, the argument, the embarrassment, the apology, felt like a turning point. Maybe it was. For years, she had lived as if the world owed her something, expecting perfection from everyone but herself. Yet today, a simple flight attendant had reminded her what humility and respect really looked like. As the fastened seatbelt sign blinked off, passengers began to stand, stretching and chatting. The mood in the cabin had transformed from tense to cheerful. Even the children who had been restless earlier were smiling now, their laughter blending with the rustle of bags and soft chatter. Karen gathered her purse and carry-on, but before leaving, she turned to glance down the aisle. Mia was still helping passengers, smiling, offering kind words, guiding a family with 2 toddlers toward the exit. That endless patience, that kindness in motion, it struck Karen like sunlight breaking through a storm. She waited until the line thinned, then stepped aside to let others pass. Her mind set on one more thing she needed to do before she left. This flight behind when the last of the passengers began disembarking. Karen approached Mia, who was checking the overhead bins one last time. "Mia," she said softly. Mia turned and smiled, her eyes lighting with gentle recognition. "Karen, did you have a good flight after all?" Karen laughed lightly. "Better than I expected. Definitely not the one I planned, though. Those are usually the best kinds," Mia said with a knowing grin. Karen nodded. "I wanted to thank you again, not just for your patience but for teaching me something I didn't know I needed to learn." Mia tilted her head. "And what's that?" "That respect isn't about who's right or who's in charge," Karen said. "It's about remembering that everyone deserves to be treated like a human being, even on bad days." Mia's smile widened. "That's a beautiful thing to realize, Karen. I'm glad you found it here, even if the lesson came mid-air." They both laughed quietly. The tension that had once filled the space between them was gone, replaced by something lighter, mutual understanding. Karen hesitated before continuing. "You know, I'm part of a community association back home. We deal with homeowners, neighbors, meetings, and, well, a lot of conflict." Mia chuckled. "Sounds intense." "It can be," Karen admitted, "but I think I've been approaching it wrong. I've always demanded respect from others without realizing I wasn't giving it first." She paused, her tone softening. "That's going to change." "That's wonderful to hear," Mia said genuinely. "Sometimes a single good moment can shift everything. Even a flight can become a little life lesson." Karen smiled, her heart lighter than when she had boarded. "You're right, this one definitely did." The last few passengers exited, and the cabin grew quiet. The captain appeared from the cockpit, nodding politely at both women as he passed by. Karen gave him a small, grateful smile. He returned it with a subtle nod of acknowledgement, unspoken truce between a humbled passenger and a man who had stood for what was right. When Karen finally stepped off the plane, the humid Miami air wrapped around her like a blanket. The scent of jet fuel and ocean salt filled her senses. For the first time in a long while, she didn't rush. Her steps were slower, more deliberate, as if she wanted to carry the calm she'd found in the clouds into the chaos of the world below. In the terminal, she saw families reuniting, travelers hurrying to connecting flights, and people laughing over cups of coffee. Life was moving fast all around her, yet she felt still anchored. She pulled out her phone, opened her notes app, and typed something quickly. Be the calm, not the chaos. She didn't know what she'd do with that phrase yet, but she knew it mattered. Maybe it would be a motto for her community meetings. Maybe just a reminder for herself. Outside the terminal, she spotted a taxi and waved it down. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, greeted her warmly. Where to, ma'am? Karen smiled. Downtown Miami, please. As the car pulled away from the curb, she watched the airport fade into the distance. Her reflection in the window looked different now. Same face, same polished hair, but the eyes were softer, less guarded, more real. She thought of Mia again, the kindness in her eyes, the calm in her voice. There was something powerful about that kind of strength, the quiet kind that didn't need to prove itself. Maybe that was what real confidence looked like. When the taxi hit a red light, Karen glanced up at the small TV screen mounted in the car. An ad was playing for a YouTube channel about neighborhood stories, HOA drama, and real-life lessons on empathy and leadership. She smiled faintly when she read the name, HOA Advisor. It felt like fate. She pulled out her phone again and whispered, maybe it's time I start sharing my own story, too. Her mind raced with ideas, a series about community, respect, and second chances. Stories inspired by real moments like this one. Maybe her journey could help someone else look in the mirror and change. By the time she arrived at her hotel, she had already made up her mind. Tomorrow, she'd begin writing her first episode script. Not the story of a Karen, but the story of someone who had once lost her way and found it again, 30,000 feet above the ground. That night, as she stood on the balcony overlooking the glittering Miami skyline, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The breeze brushed against her face, carrying with it the faint echo of the captain's words. Respect works both ways. She smiled to herself and whispered into the night sky, thank you, Mia, for showing me the better view from up there. The city lights sparkled like stars below, and for the first time, Karen knew she didn't have to be the loudest voice in the room to be heard. Sometimes, change began quietly with an apology, a smile, or even a cup of airplane coffee. And as the night deepened, Karen finally felt free, ready to start a new chapter, not just in the sky, but in her life.